Hey, I'm just gonna quickly go over what I accomplished today. Whatever it was, May the 14th. It's now May the 15th in the wee 10 minutes in the morning. Okay, I started off with this. This is just a small static window image or screenshot of my well, it's my editor that I'm building, and it shows a little OpenGL window with a test that I've built. It's a grid of doubled up triangles to make squares, and then I use vertex coloring to shade them. And I built my own custom stylized disk image file so that I could send it off to anybody who's interested. Then I was just playing around with the viewport in OpenGL, and then I started expanding the size of the test grid. Checkerboard. I use a checkerboard. It looks like a checkerboard with the middle horizontal or one side and the other direction colored so that I can tell which way the geometry is actually oriented. And then I started to implement a height map. There's an island generation website or an article on a guy's blog site talking about island generation procedurally, and it uses what's called a midpoint displacement algorithm, and I basically progressed through that. And then this is the full screen screenshot. I was basically adding it. It was like processing a pixel. I don't know who, Moist Taffy 59. That was coincidental. I don't know who that is. I wonder if that's one of those spam or Skype users. Anyway, this is just the progress of me building up. I'm going backwards here now. Basically building up the fractal generation. Then I flipped to an almost perfectly overhead view. Just a little bit of tilt so you can see the perspective. At this point right here, I am going backwards and forwards, but okay, so I'm going backwards, now I'm going forwards. At this point, there are too many dots around the outside, so I had to clip those out. And that's there, and now I'm applying a better valuation, gradients, and then filling in the squares, filling in more squares. And then this is back to showing the little screen, the whatever you want to call it. Then this is when I've actually completed filling in all the squares. That's what it looks like, pretty hideous. It's kind of like a Perlin noise generator, but very limited. And actually I just didn't have the math right. So this is when I started getting the math in, the better math. It's starting to look really noisy there. And then I finally got it to where I liked it, and I applied a flood fill. Well, it's kind of like a flood fill. Basically, I checked the height of all the pixels in the system, and if they're all below. Actually, first of all, what I do is I scan through all the pixels, and I incrementally. From 0.0 through 1.0, incrementing by 0.1, so 1/10. From 0 through 1, I check the height of all the pixels, and if 50 at the point of which there is just under 50% of the pixels below a threshold of like one of those 10% thresholds, then at that point I define, that's what I declare the flood fill level. So just around 50% of the geometry is above the water or the flood, and 50% of the geometry is below. So that's cool. It makes for a nice little view. Actually, at this point right here, I think I was using like 40 or 30%. I played around with the settings a bit. That's, I can't remember, 40%, 40%, can't remember, 40 or 50%. When I was getting really crazy, I was applying a roughness, a bit of calculation to add more noise to the height and variance. And then it got really nasty. And so actually I renamed the file name so it has more details. This is a positive weighted roughness at every point of the calculation. Let's see here, 30% positive and 20. Oh, what? No, it was a. Yeah, I had a. There's a. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Actually, I'll try to describe it. There's a roughness value that I define, and then I apply a random. Then I apply a random value modifier or multiplier to it, which is between 0.3 and negative 0.2. Basically, I calculate 0.5. I do a multiplication on that value times 0.5, so it's 50% of the strength, and then I minus 0.2, which means, you know, that 50% value stretches over the range from 30 to down through negative 20. And that's what it actually comes up. I tried out different, you might note the file names. I tried different strengths. That's 30 minus 20, and this is all 50% land. There I tried, the roughness is notably less right here, where it's only a range of 30% roughness and 20% positive and negative 10% for the weighting. That looks a lot better, and this looks a lot muddier. And then this is where it's like really significant. This is 70% of the roughness, 40% positive and negative 30%. And then I tried it out again with 20 and minus 10, and it looked really grungy again, and I confirmed that I didn't like it. And then here's 30 and minus 20 again with 50% land, and there's 30 and 20 with 40% land. I wanted to try out how much land do I like to keep in it, and I thought to myself, it really doesn't matter, I suppose. The flood fill is not necessary. I don't actually have to mute the geometry, assign the zero or the value of the floodplain to all the geometry. I could just parse the values and then define what the floodplain is, and then save that value out. So I could apply a coloration filter and keep all the geometry alive, and that's what I did. So that was like the weirdest only time when I got unless I made a mistake and didn't actually use 40%. It's the only time when I used I thought I used 40%. And it actually came up with a really interesting looking thing. I mean, like, that's really kind of weak, and that's weak. These are all using, these three, 1, 2, and 3 are all using the same configuration as far as I know, but I may have made a mistake there. This one might have been a slightly different configuration. But anyway, there's 50% again with 30 and minus 20, and I liked that enough after all these experiments to define that as my baseline configuration going forward. And then I changed the camera position, and I made a couple mistakes with the coloration, so I just took a screenshot for fun. That's the what do you call it? The terrain height map smoothed out. That's another example of it. It's still kind of just bleh. I mean, it looks nice. It looks interesting. It's black and white, grayscale rather. Oh, now here's where it gets really interesting, and I think this is the second last screenshot where I started using color, and I actually got colors for the sand from a Google image search. So it goes from a darker, just a little bit darker, dark sand color, wet sand color, to a lighter, dry sand color just before the green of the foliage. And then I tweaked it up a little bit, so I made the range a little bit more significant, from dark to light. I didn't change it up for the actual height, but it is over a certain height. Values or geometry that are at a certain height will be lower, darker colored sand, and some that are, and then it ranges up to the highest level of geometry, which is the lighter sand, and then then it goes into the green. Okay, so that's my speech, and all the way from way back. I'll go back. Yeah, all of that. It's nice to build up from nothingness to something that looks really neat. Anyway, as I was going along, I was always changing, so it was interesting. Just forward progress, yeah. Cool.